team. Welcome to episode 145 of Transition Talk, where we talk about dental transitions and how to navigate the sometimes messy path to practice ownership. Many owners often see satellite locations, or a second location, as a powerful growth strategy. But like many aspects of the transition world, it's important to know that a satellite comes with both opportunity and risk. Now, we've discussed satellite locations in episode way back, 47, and we also recently touched on it in our last episode, episode 144. But in this episode, we wanted to expand on our insights and discuss the common myths and the reality behind each of those. We're fully behind you as you expand your empire, but we want to make sure we give you the tools to succeed and don't have to say I told you so later. So before we get going, Mr. Loretto.
Hello, Miss Ratcliffe. We thought 144 just had like an opportunity to expand on this whole satellite thing. Let's just do another episode. It was so good.
We've got lots of hot sports
I feel like
opinions.
we just teased the listener with a little bit, and we didn't finish what we really wanted to say.
Yep, we're coming in hot on this topic today.
It's funny, I sent some Joellen ideas on the treadmill this morning, and they're just really like, grab my phone, text Joellen Deli on this, you're just... And she's like, what is this? And so she'll have to hear what that is.
If you haven't
later.
had to decipher a Charles Loretto thought email,
Oh, God.
then you are not living.
Yes,
Okay?
it'll be my roast at retirement. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of random ideas and thoughts that people just start reading off.
Well, I've been really into speaking of that, I feel like sometimes I just don't want to text and I don't want to type. And so I've been very big into the voice memos lately. I've been sending a lot of voice memos. Like I'll just be like, talk. You don't have to worry about typos. Like you can just like say it and then you send it. It's kind of a fun way to communicate. So
I love the voice.
if you're in my contacts, you might be getting a voice memo soon.
It doesn't translate exactly perfect, but again, I have a history of not saying things perfectly. So.
No, not voice to text, like an actual audio
you're right,
message.
You're right. That's such a better idea.
Right?
Yes.
But like me and my best friend have been doing it, and we never get to talk anymore because she has 3 children and I don't know, life. And so it's fun just to hear her voice,
Yeah.
And so that's been fun.
I will do that.
Yeah.
I have 3 friends that we just do that check in. I'm going to start doing some voice.
Yeah. I mean,
I like
why
that.
not?
I'm learning something.
Yeah. And they can keep it, and if they kept it because it says they kept it, and then you're like, what are you doing with this? But if not, it disappears. And so
You may have to show me this after the podcast.
I'm going to show you.
How's your family? What are we doing? What are we doing? Tell me about the girls. I don't need about Chris. Chris is not important. What about the girls? Tell me about girls.
True. And he's never going to listen to this, so it's fine.
That's why I say it.
So Bryn is 10, and she's kind of put her toe back into like the competitive dance world. I'm not a dance mom, and so like that's not our forte, but she loves dance. But she hates having to do something like at the level that you have to practice for competitive dance. Like she'll do it and she'll do it happily, but like she wants to do other things. We probably dipped our toe in and now we're going to dip it back out. But we had our first dance competition, and man, like dance moms are something else. It was like kind of some cattiness happening. They were talking about our dances. Like there was a huge dressing room and it was 2 companies, and like literally 75% of the room was this one company, and we're like equal size. It was in this crappy high school with like no beverages, no food, nowhere to sit. And we only had dances from like 3 and we left at 7. This other family was there Friday, Saturday till midnight. They were there yesterday until 9. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how horrible.
You said 3 to 7 like it was no big deal. That's 4 hours for a 1-minute routine. So
well, she has 5 dances.
Okay.
So she's in 5 dances, and then like you have to watch other people in between, and then you got a costume change. So, like my Aura ring was like, you have got all your steps in today, because I was basically like running back and forth 15 times. So we made Lila come. So Lila's 15, and we're trying to be like, hey Lila, there are other people in the world. But no, she's fantastic. She's gonna start driving, which is scary. So we're looking at cars and trying to get her behind the wheel. So it's just fun, Teenagers are a different ballgame than 10-year-olds. So I am toeing the line of both and just eating up the 10-year-old phase, because they turn into, which are also, teenagers are lovely on the other end of the spectrum, right? But it's just like a different type of parenting and a different type of relationship and a different set of challenges.
I still think 10 and 15 are still magical. I mean, you start getting over 15, they start becoming a little bit of a problem. Mm-hmm. But graduating over to my children, my daughter graduated.
That's crazy.
Yeah, she graduated college. So this is the 4th one out of 4 that finished school. 2 in their master's program, and they pretty much have them kind of prepaid. I'm getting close to like literally all 4 are
How old
off
is Bella?
of the pair. Well, you should be 22, 18 and 4, but she's 23. She took an extra lap.
She was 12 when I started.
Yeah.
That's crazy, Dad.
Yeah, she is. We're doing a little dinner tonight with the mom.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. It is true. It's funny. We're having a little baby thing here for a member of another department, and she's having her first. And so everyone's like, give you advice. And I'm like, man, this is so hard because it's like you see the whole range and I hear you and I'm like, man, this is just like a never ending journey here that we're on. But got to nurture your first one just like your second one. Speaking of second ones, locations. I dad joked that right into existence.
How about this one? How about the satellite is not important as the main office?
That is a truth. That is a truth. That is
I literally just sent a picture of me when I had Cole, and I sent it to both kids. And Cole said, is that me or Bella? And I said, of course it's you, son. I said, we don't take pictures of second children.
Bella's like, Dad. But no, on this topic, I mean, we joke, but our kind of thought, right, is like your primary location should be your focus until it is like maxed and like at capacity. And you have like really kind of taken as much profit and you've made it as efficient and as lean as you can. And then a second location can come into existence. We know in actuality, that is not always how it works. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a second location comes in because something comes up on the market or a life event happens and maybe it's sooner than you would have liked, but you can kind of see the opportunity. Sometimes in your mind, you just envisioned yourself having a multi-location practice. And so you're trying to just kind of do that, right? And you're kind of expanding your empire. But there are certainly myths in this realm that I think our goal is to try to educate you on so that you don't make these mistakes, or at least know that they're out there so you can avoid them if you end up going this route. The overarching myth that will hit on everything we talk about today is the myth that more locations means more profit. Okay. That is certainly the goal. And we hope that happens, but that is not the case. And I would say the majority of people that we talk to that have opened a second location or are looking at buying someone else's second location. So keep that in mind as we go through. You'll hear us talk about the profit and cost efficiency of it as we go through. But the first one that I want to talk to, and I'll throw it to you, Mr. Loretto, is a satellite office does not necessarily equal a full second location. So what are your thoughts when I say that?
Well, I think when people just in general say satellite, to me, it just means part-time.
Yep.
It's this 1 day, 2 day. It's always referred to as this other thing. You know, when they have a full up and running full-time practice where it's practice 1 does 2 million and practice 2 does 2 million, it's never referred to as a satellite practice.
No.
It's just referred to as I have 2 locations and they're both humming along $2 million. The problem with these sometimes satellite locations, it's no different than a startup practice. It just takes a minute to get up and going. And just the cost to outfit these practices now, it's just gone through the roof. I mean, the old days of have a second location, I put $300,000, $400,000 into it, just with the cost of the build out and material, the cost of labor, and obviously the cost of equipment. It's why the banks now have increased their lending dollars from a $600,000 kind of second location / startup to banks now lending $800,000 to $900,000, even $1 million for these locations. So you've got, I think first it's just this misunderstanding of second location, like really what does that mean and what is a satellite? To me, I think that the satellite is always referred to kind of as this smaller practice. And when I hear smaller practice, I just see inefficiencies like you talked about. And so I would always like stress if I'm in a primary location, can I get more out of it? And just kind of throw out some numbers here, like the most unbelievable, well-ran single location for ops, you might see somebody cranking out $2 million out of that, like $500 a chair. And so if you've got a 4-op practice and it's maybe landlocked and you can't put the 5th operatory in, and you're stuck at $1 million, and that idea is, well, let's just go get another location, then I would challenge more on scheduling fees, just the efficiencies inside of those chairs. I would really want to exhaust those types of measures before I went out and made that investment for that second location.
Yeah. And I think too, like when we talk about a second location versus a satellite, right? A satellite in itself is really just an extension, right? So it's typically like, I mean, most of them that we see at least, same EIN, they've got the same accounting, like they've got all these components. So it's not a separate distinguishable asset It is just an extension of the primary, like you mentioned. And so from a value perspective, if I were to go value that satellite, it doesn't really have a lot of value separately of the primary location. In most often cases, all the fixed costs that we have for the satellite are oftentimes a drag on the primary location. And so it is a pull of your time too, right? And so your ability to spread yourself between two offices could be beneficial, right? Like if you have an associate in your primary location to pick up some of the work or, whatever that looks like, that's great. But if not, you're really just putting less effort into your primary and now not a full effort into your secondary location. And you're kind of like spreading yourself a little too thin, which is oftentimes the cause of kind of the reason why people end up trying to let go of them is because they don't have the bandwidth to run both the way they want to run the primary.
One thing I want to say, there's another myth is that somehow these second locations, third locations, I have 5 locations, that they are more valuable than just a single location. It's just not the case. If it's a private practice sale or private equity sale, what we're really looking at is the profitability. I think many times that this second location satellite is set up is, to me, I'll take a step back and what is the vision of this second location? What is it? Well, I've got an associate coming in, graduating from a dental school or visiting a residency or maybe coming back. And so I want to get a practice set up for them. So again, back to the vision. The vision is that we're going to have single location at $1.5 million. We're going to grow that to $1.5 million. Or we're going to create maybe a partnership to both offices. If that is the vision, then you can make the argument perhaps that maybe you don't set the second EIN up. If the vision is that that second location is 20 or 30 miles and we don't know what we're going to do with that office, then the second EIN number that can establish its own financial statements completely separate will allow flexibility for perhaps an associate to buy into that practice either at 50% and that we can run and treat it more like a silent practice owner, or we can over time kind of build it up, make a little margin off of it, maybe with the associate, and then have that associate buy it out completely. And so again, that vision is so important of why are we opening up and investing in those locations. If I am the buyer and I come across something like this as well, I'm taking this episode to be thinking, what am I purchasing, to what you just got through saying? Do I have employees that are at the primary location that are coming over here? Is the brand, the phone number, the patients, how far of a commute is that from a non-compete standpoint? The financial statements are just kind of maybe not that well completed in the first place between the two offices, much less do you have separate financials. So what do those financials look like? And I will tell you that from an accounting perspective, it's hard to come up with what that value is. So you've got some challenges, both as the seller who's investing in the satellite as well as potentially the buyer who may be buying this satellite office.
Yeah. And when we say like separate EIN and separate financials for a satellite location, I do not mean that in your general ledger, you just kind of like add a note to certain expenses. This is like a separate set of financials, a separate payroll account, a separate supply account. They can be under a master account, right? So you can still have all your efficiencies you have from your first office, but like it needs to run on its own, right? If you do share team members, when they come to the satellite location, they are clocking in on a separate system under a separate ID than they do when they work at your primary office. If you do that, you still have problems if you're sharing a team and you're sharing a website and you're sharing a brand, but at least you can say, this is what this practice does on its own. You will also run into problems if your satellite location allows patients to go back and forth, right? So like if you have patients that can show up either place and be fine, even if you have separate financials, then you are probably looking at something that you are going to keep long-term unless you don't allow that, right? So it's like, I love what you've said, which is like, why before you do it, what is the goal and what do I know and what do I not know? And if there's any hint that you don't know what the future of this is going to be and you're just trying it, then the cleaner it is on its own, the better you are in the long term, right?
Most of our buyers are so nervous about the acquisition of a practice. And I'm not going to discourage and say, don't ever buy a satellite, but I would say that if you're buying a satellite that perhaps is all under one roof, you got the patients going back and forth, you got the team going back and forth, that it's typically not going to be this is a slam dunk deal. Like you got to do it. We really need to be very thoughtful in this case on the price. And it's really the price for that is to mitigate some of that risk.
Yeah. And there are solutions, right? Like if you buy one that only has one website, right? Like, okay, I can tell you what we've done historically to make that work. If you have certain patients that go back and forth, majority don't. Okay, how do we fix that from a legal document, from a time perspective? Like, are there team members that are shared? Great. Okay, seller, are you going to let that person still work at that other location for a period of time if they choose, right? You can't make people do things. But so there's solutions to all of these things. You just have to know these things exist so you can know to plan for them.
Yeah. One thing too, you can do a seller carry. So maybe we value the business at $700,000, but we only get $500 from the bank. The seller carries a $200,000 carry. It puts incentive that they're not just taking all the patients, and we hit certain revenue numbers that practice has historically. So no, you're right. I mean, we're trying to always get people into ownership and help people with the transition of the business, but also mitigate as much as the risk we can and just overcome these obstacles. Because like I said, these are all obstacles, not something we can't figure out, but the key is just really educating you so you just don't jump into this and not think this thing through.
Yeah. Another myth that kind of comes into play is that if I was able to do this now, like my primary location works, it's great, then my second location will work too. And maybe that's true for you, but it's not guaranteed, right? Just because you had success in this environment with this setup doesn't mean your second location is going to be a success. And that's not a fault of you. It's just, as I mentioned earlier, you are one person splitting your time now, right? So now you have, if it's true second location with like a new staff, let's say you're acquiring another practice to make it a second location, you have a whole new team with a whole new set of personalities, with a whole new set of patient base. It's probably far enough from your other location to probably have a different kind of maybe patient base or geography. And so that alone, right, presents its own obstacles. And if you don't have the ability to be in that practice until you can get a handle on it, right, then the chances of that practice kind of having maybe some false starts and some issues is big. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on that?
Look, I see it all the time. Like, this makes me think of a story. Young lady, I don't know, she's 35, 40, crushing it. Primary location does $4 million, and she had 5 other offices, and she acquired those offices kind of post-COVID. And the highest collection office, I think there was at least 5 other offices. The highest collection office was $700,000. She was not able to replicate even $1 million of collections at her second location of 5 other locations. And her primary office was carrying all of these other offices. And so it's very difficult to try to replicate that. I mean, if anything, we are what we preach. I mean, King Waters has one office. We could have other offices. Good office in Charlotte and Florida, and I've got 500 clients in Florida. You could easily have another office there. Mm-hmm. But we choose to have one because this is where it happens. This is the learning, the training, the mentoring. Mm-hmm. It's an experience that's here, and there's no difference than that with the patient and of a dental practice as well.
Yeah, and I think there are certainly instances where I can envision a second location working, but it's, in my opinion, it's a situation where I have like an associate, they're maybe going to be a partner, and we are kind of at a space perspective. And in order to grow enough, maybe it's a specialist practice, in order to grow enough, we have to have a second location. Maybe it's closer to that associate, soon to be partner's kind of hometown, so they've got a referral base. And so we open that second location knowing that I have a great associate, maybe soon to be partner, who thinks like I do, who's going to lead like I do, who's going to be consistent across branding and team and training. Well, then, yeah, maybe that second location is going to have a better chance of replicating what we did in the primary office, but it's certainly going to be harder, even if you do have like a great setup like that.
Yeah, I mean, the practices, like we should focus on the positive, the ones that I have seen that are really successful. To me, success is when you're doing $1 million or greater. Just we're able to overcome a lot of our fixed costs and get into a profit margin that is, to me, I would say rewarding, is identifying kind of that $1 million practice or less, 6, 7 year collections. That doctor going to perhaps be working back. That maybe owner doctor has connections with the dental school, has a really good pulse and relationships with maybe some students and residents. I can think about people that are already involved in the new dental school in Arkansas, and they're already there teaching. And not only they're teaching, but perhaps those students are now coming through on rotation through their large offices. So therefore they have that means and capability to attract those people. And so, hey, let's go and perhaps buy some of these other practices that are doing, knowing I've got this influx of people coming in. We can take our same systems and put growth and marketing. I could come in and do some education on certain procedures, getting them up to speed, and then allowing them to be some type of equity partner. These are really good examples. These are success stories, but I would say those are the rare stories. Those are the ones I love. Those are the ones I love to celebrate. It's just that most people aren't able to replicate that because they perhaps don't have those connections or that ability to work significantly harder. Before you go from 4 days to 3 days to 2 days in the chair, you have to be able to work significantly harder clinically and business-wise to establish yourself to bring the other people in and have those connections and a very unusual skill set that it's hard, but a leadership skill set to be able to bring people up to those speeds.
I agree. And I think that from a high level standpoint, understanding, even if you don't intend to sell it eventually, I think understanding this next myth, which is like satellite locations are attractive to buyers, is a good way to think about how do I do this? What is the reason I'm doing this? Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to transition your practice, right? And whether that's the satellite or a second location, kind of taking that off board and selling just it or selling your whole operation. I think if you look at like, how do I position this so that it is most attractive when I am ready to be done or ready to bring someone else on, I think is a good way to look at it because then it allows you to think about risk and opportunity from someone else's perspective instead of yours, which we can always be swayed a little bit. And so that's myth number 4, which is satellite locations are attractive to buyers, which is true and not true, right? I think a satellite is attractive to a buyer in the exact way any other practice location would be attractive to a buyer. It is not attractive because it's related to your primary location. That's actually probably something that makes it not attractive. It's also not attractive necessarily if you say, hey, I'm not trying to sell just a satellite. I'm trying to sell my whole operation and it's a primary practice with a satellite location. That also depends on the buyer, right? Like not every buyer wants to have 2 locations where they have to drive out 20, 30, 40 minutes outside of their primary location to go work a couple days. So what are your thoughts on kind of how a buyer views either the satellite by itself or a satellite when it's a part of a larger operation?
I think you summed it up perfectly. I mean, the bottom line is if it makes sense, it makes sense. You know, if it's probably the better case with maybe 2 locations would be like an orthodontic practice. It's doing 2 days a week where they could easily go and work 2 days here and generate the $1 million and 2 days a week at the other practice, or both have nice collections, good overheads, and it's a good top line revenue for something like that. For the case of general dentistry, you know, if they're 2 $600,000 practices that are doing $1 million, man, we got just 2 overhead. It's just not as attractive. And I agree. I don't want to, more than likely, there's something that brings me to that community. And that's where I want to be. And I don't want to be stuck in a 20, 30 minute, depending if it's a major traffic location of what that 20 miles or 15 miles really is. I always encourage people to live near where they work. And now all of a sudden we're just getting that situation where it doesn't work. I will tell you, for the most part, my experiences on those satellite locations that they put a lot of money into, those are the ones that they're trying to unload. Mm-hmm. It was a great idea, big investment, but in the end, it's like it's just too much effort for not enough return. If I can put a little bit more effort into my primary location, and I can go from 1.3 to 1.5. I can just look at what my margin is in that $200,000, which could be $150,000. Could I just figure that out besides trying to figure out how to grow a satellite location? Maybe it's going to do $800,000, $900,000. Plug in an associate in there for me to make the same $150,000. Mm-hmm. It's something that, to go back to it, you just need to be clear about the vision of why are we doing this. And again, I can make a lot of cases for why. A specialist, I can really, certain communities, it's a town of 10,000. There's not call it a periodontist there, and I can do it for a very inexpensive. I'm going to use my friend's GP practice and do surgeries there on Friday so it doesn't cost me anything. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I get it. That is a different thing. There's like literally no investment there. You're just showing up and doing a ton of dentistry. To me, that's where I can get definitely my head wrapped around it and support it. It's just these big, giant $700, $800, $900 million projects that are basically a startup with the hope intent that we're just going to grow and it's going to be super attractive. And there's just a lot of challenges that actually faces.
Yeah. And I think what you've said is true, right? Like startups are not as cheap as they used to be. I think you mentioned earlier, like 800 plus?
It's common.
And so when this makes sense, maybe it is something where you look at it like a startup, right? Like you're a buyer who says, hey, there's this satellite location. There's a lot of risk. I'm going to have to rebrand. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do that. Look at it as a startup and say, if it's well put together, the equipment's good, it has a decent base and foundation, comparatively to what you would spend on a startup, is that kind of a worthy trade? But you have to look at it like a startup and not an acquisition, right? I'm going to have to rebrand. I'm going to have to kind of make the investment in a new staff or some new staff, new marketing materials. So really kind of understanding as a buyer, if you are looking at one of these satellite locations, yes, you need to dive into the financials if they're separated. You need to be able to understand kind of what team do you have, what team do you not have. And you need to take an honest look at yourself too. Like, what am I going to be able to bring to the table? Am I from there? And so I've got a good network and I know people and I have connections and I'm going to be able to bring these people on, or am I moving somewhere where I'm going to have to establish myself and do all of this? So I would say you're doing the same research you would do that we would recommend if you're going to do a startup, right? From a marketing and getting a foundation established.
Yeah, I think a lot of these sometimes are some of these smaller practices that we try to scoop up. And so that was what I was texting this morning at 8 o'clock to Joellen, is some of these small startup and acquisitions of when does it make sense? And so that is the tease for another episode, Christy.
I like it. Well, this was good. Anything else? Any final thoughts on satellites before I wrap us up today? I think we covered all our main points.
You crush it today. And to all the second children, we do love you. We do love you. We just sorry we didn't take any pictures of you. And first babies were always first babies.
That's fine. That's very true. Sometimes they're the problem. Sometimes they're the star. It just depends. In all seriousness, we don't want to discourage you from growing your dental empire, right? Like, we think satellites and second locations and really becoming kind of a leader across multiple locations, if that's what fits your business and that's what fits your client base and your patient base and your referral base, that's fantastic. But we always want to ensure you're educated and you consider both the opportunities and the risk behind your decision and behind the why of why you want to do this satellite location. They can be a great opportunity when approached strategically and not just a simple extension of your primary location. So that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us on episode 145 of Transition Talk. As always, make sure to share the transition love with those who may not know of us yet. And of course, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, friends.
Thanks, guys.